Hello, I'm Rose.
Hello, Rose.
Hello. My question is for Jodi. I've always been very much fascinated with Matthew Farrell and what his history is and why he can see the things he sees. Are we going to hear any more about that at any point?
The author has no clear idea where that is going to lead. But in the Time Police book that I'm writing at the moment, Matthew is using the time map to track various members of the Time Police who've got themselves into trouble, and the map will speak to him. Thank you very much, that was very gratifying. What that means, what that will lead to, the author has no idea at all, so typical Taylor failure to plan ahead.
Thank you very much. Next question.
Hello, Sue. Jodi, Mavis Enderby, did you take the name from the village in Lincolnshire?
No, I didn't. I had no idea there was a village in Lincolnshire called Mavis Enderby. It's just the sort of bad luck that dogs me wherever I go. Sorry about that, but no, I didn't. And I'm not sure I've even ever been to Lincolnshire. Yes, I have. When I was in the Air Force, I did my training there. But since I never came off the unit the whole time, I was not aware of Mavis Enderby. So huge apologies to anybody here from Mavis Enderby.
And the next question, please.
Hi, my name's Keith Jackson. It's to both of you, really. When you have a break within a series, you go off and you write something else for, I don't know how long it takes, a year or so to produce another book. How difficult is it to get back into the skin of some of the characters that you haven't written about, even thought about possibly, for a year or more?
Do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, so getting back into characters. Surprisingly easy, actually, which is kind of weird, and not weird all at the same time. Because if you think about it, you could have, say, 5 different family members and friends all in a room, and as you were talking to each of them, you would modify yourself, the conversation and style and everything automatically. So I think humans are actually very good at modifying their sort of conversation to where it's directed. So I find that actually speaking as Thursday or Jack Sprat or whatever, it just sort of slots in. You know, I remind myself, I'm rereading the book, so I know, the voice of Thursday, but it's surprisingly easy, I find. Do you follow what about you?
Yes, actually, I agree. It's not a problem that I have. Possibly because the main series, St Mary's, is told in the first person, and the Time Police is in the third person. And they are actually quite similar anyway. But no, I don't have a problem.
Thank you very much. Next question. Coming down the front.
Yeah, you get it.
Mandy, I'm quite partial to a bit of blood and guts, so I wondered whether we might visit the Crusades at any point. I can just see Max in a veil and around like that.
Again, I have no plans, but I never take anything off the table. So you planted the seed, let's see if anything comes forth.
Hello, it's George from Wardrobe. If Netflix came knocking, would you sign the St Mary series with them?
Well, you're just a troublemaker. There's always one. Okay, I have hugely mixed feelings about this. I have strong feelings about the quality of some historical stuff that's produced these days. I get extremely agitated, and I'm just so sad, I can't believe I admit this, but I become extremely agitated every time a female steps outside without a hat. I am old enough to remember the time when boys and girls, 14 or 15, you went through a rite of passage. And, sorry, I keep slipping. Boys came out of short trousers into long trousers, and girls wore stockings and could put their hair up. And from girls' point of view, you were now a young lady. And yet in all these historical epics, you have these nitwit heroines rushing about outside with their hair flowing down around their shoulders, which marks them out either as a prostitute or somebody who's not yet 14. No boy in his right mind would ever go back to wearing short trousers. So why filmmakers assume that girls would be quite happy to mark themselves out as not yet grown up is a mystery to me. And sorry, I will stop ranting now.
No, we're enjoying it.
And it distresses me when historical facts, and it distresses Max as well, historical facts are twisted to make a nice story or to change a story or whatever. So half of me, well probably about 60% of me, would not be happy at all. The other 40% of me would be enormously flattered and would let it be fun. But I think on the whole, because as soon as you sign, you lose all control and they can do anything that they like. And I'm not sure I could live with that. Mine is not a forgiving nature. And I really hate to have to go and set fire to Netflix headquarters.
Can I drop something in there as well?
Do.
And I think this is a sort of similar thing, is that some intellectual property books, the chance of it going wrong, right, it can be quite low for some intellectual property, like, John Grisham novels. It's really, the failure, the chance is quite low. But when you're working with something that has a lot of different facets to it, like your work and my work, the possibility of getting it wrong is actually much, much higher. And you get these things wrong, and you get them very wrong.
So what?
Yes, I already mentioned it.
Yeah. So I think there's that aspect, that I had Last Dragon Slayer made by Sky, and I think it missed an awful lot of points that it should have got, because the possibility of getting wrong was very high, and I think that's a risk that we in the genres, and we certainly in this speculative fantasy, we run the risk of it going very, very wrong.
Yeah, and it can be damaging as well.
Yeah.
Audible sold their dramatisation to me on the grounds that it would attract loads and loads of new readers because it was a revolutionary treatment of it. And it did not do that, and probably put any number of people off. They would listen to it and think, God, I'm not buying that book.
Yeah.
And it's made me very cautious and very wary, because it's a horrible feeling to have that happen to your work.
There was the Vi Shawsky books. There was one made with Kathleen Turner, and it wasn't that bad, to be honest. And it's a whole series. They go through the alphabet, a whole series, and because of it, they never made any sequels, because people look at it and they go, "Well, that made any money. It was a flop, so we won't look at any of the rest." So there is that possibility as well, is that someone will do something awful with it, and then anyone, looking at it afterwards would go, "Well, we're not doing we're not taking a Jasper Fall book and doing that again, because it was a screaming disaster."
It is hugely exciting and flattering, but you're right, it can be a real double-edged weapon, and if they get it wrong, it can do more damage than good, actually. So I'm not actually in a position where I'm having to make that decision at the moment. The rights are being assigned, but I'm very naughty, and I looked at it and they said, well, we'd like the rights to offer it around on a shopping expedition for 12 months or so. And my first thought was, well, if they've got the rights, nobody else can have them. And I'm seeing this as a kind of holding expedition. But it is extremely difficult, and I get quite uncomfortable even just thinking about it. So if it ever actually happened, I'd probably disappear in a puff of smoke.
The ideal position is actually an option every year forever, and they never make it.
That would be perfect, because they pay you for it.
Yeah, exactly. So
The easiest money you'll ever make.
Yeah, I had DreamWorks had an option. Well, they didn't have an option. DreamWorks were interested in the Humpty Dumpty book.
Oh.
Right, Big Over Easy, and they just shilly-shallying for a year. And what we found out later was that there were parts of it that might have been actionable because they were doing Humpty Dumpty, which was in the cat. What was it? Puss in Boots. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, I should remember that.
Oh yes, of course.
Right. So we think that part of what I had written about, they may have included, and it wasn't actionable. So they were shilly-shallying for a year, which was essentially take it off the market. But at the end of the day, they said, we'll pay you the option fee, and you can have it back.
Yeah.
So that was win-win.
Yes.
So that would be an ideal situation.
That would be very nice. I'd be quite happy with
Yeah.
that.
The next question. Hello, I'm Janet from Jarrow, and there's often on Facebook groups a question that says, all of your favourite characters meet up in a pub and what happens? And all of my favourite characters are really kind of okay with each other. There's police procedurals and things like that. But I've always had a headcanon of Thursday next, and Max comparing scars.
Oh, that's not weird at all.
Now, the question is, who's got the most scars?
Oh, God, I don't know.
Have you looked recently?
No, Thursday's pretty scarred, I must say. Pretty damaged, actually. But I don't know how many. I've never actually, I'd have to go through and sort of figure out.
No, I think I'd have to ask Leon if he's
I think I think she's been shot a couple of times.
Yeah, blown up.
Yeah.
Cut by Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
Stabbed and died.
Yeah, Thursday's been killed numerous
What
times.
about emotional scars?
Not helping. Yes. I don't know, we've got a couple of quite damaged heroines between us. Let's call it an honourable draw.
Yeah, I think so.
Diane, I had been really hoping for some sort of academic debate between the two of you based on anatomy and shape and things as to whether a dodo says grockle grockle or plock plock.
Well, I mean, the good thing about writing about dodos, I'm sure you come across this as well, is that by really a kind of hour of fast reading, you can be an expert in dodos. You know, because there's really not that much known. I mean, there was a white paper a few years back where someone had spent a lot of time trying to figure out if they ran or waddled or walked or whatever. And in the end, it was like just purely conjecture. And that's what's great about things like Neanderthals or mammoths or dodos, is that you can really do what you want with them. And as long as there's a sort of, you know, a little bit of bedrock of truth about them, that you can just sort of decide what it is. But I think we're both correct. We're being very, like being parents here, isn't it? It's like you're both right. I don't know, I mean, do you just came up with the word grockle? I mean, that's where I used to live, that's a tourist.
Yeah, it just came to me. Well, we could settle the whole thing. I'm one of those dangerous people who sees absolutely nothing wrong with cloning Tyrannosaurus rexes, any dinosaurs. Bring back the mammoths, bring back dodos. Let's bring back dodos and settle it once and for all.
Oh, just see what happens.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting. I mean, you can do some quite interesting comparisons, because in different languages, animals make different sounds.
Yes.
You know, and although we actually do write in the same language, it might be sort of, you know, something like that. I don't know. Plockle.
So my personal idea would be somewhere between a bark and a honk, so you get a bonk.
Yeah. A blockle.
I just imagine the word bomb.
Or a block. It's a block, isn't it? Or a blockle.
A Glock is a bell.
A block, and it's a
German
sidearm as
bell,
well.
which can be quite nice.
Like a
Maybe
glockenspiel.
they're actually quite melodious. Maybe they sing beautifully.
Yeah. The Song of the Dodo. Song of the Dodo.
Ready for the next question?
It's Chris. Is there anyone you would invite to play in your sandpit?
In what way? Sorry.
As in they could write books in your settings.
Well, other people, other writers.
You look horrified by it.
Well, I thought there was an interesting sort of meaning. I'm not quite 100% sure of the meaning in the sandbox. We are the sandbox in the speculative.
Would you let
genres.
somebody write in your stories set in your universes?
Oh, I see. Well, I think we do in the fan fiction, don't we? I mean, there are lots of people out there in fan fiction land who write Thursday Next fan fiction. So I think people do. Do you have big fan fictioners?
I think so, yes. I tend not to get involved because I don't want to cross-contaminate ideas and things. But there is a group called Virtual St. Mary's where one or two of them are here today. Where they've actually sorted themselves out and they go on missions and they're in various departments and things. And I pop onto the website occasionally just to check out what they're up to and whether any of it's legal or not. But fan fiction I tend to stay away from. I don't mind if people want to use the world but not the characters. And I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of stay away from it as well. And I used to be a little bit sniffy about it because I thought, well, you know, why don't you write your own books? If you're going to put all this much effort in, why don't you write your own books with your own characters and stuff like that? But I think I was missing the point. It's actually a celebration of my characters and my writing, and I think I was, you know, heavily missing the point. So it's like I'm not involved with it, but you know, if you want to do it and have fun, you know, who am I to stop that?
Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Tamsin. I'm a huge fan of Markham and Hunter. Are we ever going to hear the backstory of how they got together properly?
Well, I have dealt with it a little bit. He was bicycle jousting and went over the handlebars and opened his eyes and she was bending over him. I'm not sure how much more detail. There's a little bit of them in the Christmas story, which I've just finished. He, not surprisingly, ends up in sickbay again, and she's with him. And there's a little bit of a moment between them, which I think is quite nice. But no, other than that. But I'll put it on the list and have a think about it. Yes.
Are they married?
Would you like them to be? I think they are actually. I think Hunter is pretty moral, and I think they are. And I think they're just winding Peterson up. Yes. I would if I was there.
Hi, my name is Annabelle, and sometimes when I'm writing things, like I really like a plot point I've chosen, but then by the time I get to the end, I've had to cut it out because it's useless to the plot. Is there anything you've had to cut out that you've been really annoyed or unhappy that you've had to cut it out because it was one of your favourite bits?
Yes, my editor is very keen on taking out my favourite bits. Yes, I do. I take things out because they don't fit. And if it doesn't fit, it doesn't matter how beautifully it's written or whatever. If it doesn't fit, it's got to go. The secret, I find, is not to throw it away. I open a file headed Remnants of 14th St. Mary's or something like that, and it goes in there. So it's not lost to the world, and if you're not actually losing it to the world, it makes it easier to let go. And I tell myself that I can come back to it and maybe incorporate it into something in the future, which also makes the decision to cut it easier. And to make it easiest of all, I've never actually gone back and taken anything out of these files and used it in the future. So your initial instinct to take it out because it's not right was absolutely correct. Does that help?
Thank you.
When you're writing and there's a little voice at the back of the head, listen to it. It's usually right.
Yeah.
You know, if it doesn't work, I'm exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Is that the one that tells me to kill everybody?
Yeah!
Except that voice.
Next question, please. Hi, I'm Dawn. You've talked about misdirection of characters. I've always been fascinated by Dottle, and whether in the very beginning you envisaged her character development as it's shown in the books and what happens, or whether it just sort of happened, there was a bit of an idea, but whether it just happened.
No, she was wrong right from the start. And so I deliberately made her a sympathetic character that everybody would feel sorry for, just so that I could make her betrayal all the more savage at the end. And then I pushed her off the roof, and it was great.
Hi, I'm Caroline. I've got a similar question about Marco. When did you decide who he was, and do you know the future for him and his family?
No spoilers, please.
I don't know the future. Haven't thought about it at all. I didn't know who he was for a long time. For the first 2 or 3 books, he was just the comic relief. And then he elbowed his way into more and more and more of the stories, and I completely lost control. And I had to start thinking about who he could possibly be. And it became apparent that he had to be somebody fairly important. And I enjoyed releasing little snippets of information, like he'd had a really good education. He knew what was going on better than the historians did half the time. And that was great fun to do. And then I sat up in bed one night, bolt upright, and thought, oh, I know who he is. Ran it by my then editor, who was quite horrified. But we talked about it. I talked her down, put it that way. And I wrote the story with a great deal of trepidation, and honestly expected to get a lot of comment along the lines of, God, you've really jumped the shark this time. But people said, yeah, that's who he is. I've no idea where he's going. I don't think he does either. But he's quite settled and happy for the time being.
Next question, please.
Hi, my name's Julie. I'm just interested in the character of Max. I really like her, but do you see her as a really nice character or quite selfish?
Yes, I think she's selfish. I think she's quite nice right up until the moment she's not. What she does possess is the ability to be not nice when it's needed. She doesn't have that filter that nice, normal people often have, even to defend themselves. There's kind of like a filter and a line beyond which most people will not step. Max will step over that line, usually to protect somebody else rather than herself. But she is necessary. It is necessary for her to do what she does. And I think there's always a justification for it. And I try and get this across in the books, with Dr. Bairstow as well. He's not necessarily a nice person, but he's a leader, and he does the things that are necessary so that other people don't have to. And I remember in the god-awful days when I was in local government, they sent me on so many courses, none of which did any good at all. And it was the role of management, and we were asked to say what we looked for in a manager. And there were lots of people saying, oh, well, you know, they've got to be approachable, and they've got to be nice, and they've got to take an interest in me. And nobody, not one single person except me, said, I want my manager to be competent. My manager's got to be good at what she does. And that is what a leader does. They do.
in the long tradition of sort of, I don't know, Jonathan Swift and sort of restoration comedy. So I have a list of names which aren't names but could, logically be names, and I kind of pluck them off the list. Every time I see something that I like, that has a little singing to it. So Thursday Next is my mother used to say Thursday Next instead of Next Thursday, and that's very much of her age. And Thursday Next also has an internal rhythm to it, de-dum, Thursday Next. So I thought, okay, that's good, it could work. Bowden Cable is a name that could sort of work. They're actually the cables that you have on bicycle brakes, that's called a Bowden Cable. So I think a lot of names, I like sort of playing with silly names. I don't know whether I'd do it again, given the choice, and do it, because it can be distracting, I think, for a reader perhaps who's not looking for it. But I'm writing the next Thursday book, and she has a character who she has a sort of slightly interesting relationship, and his name is Roger That. And it just struck me as a really good name, Thursday Next and Roger That, and it's like, okay, have they got some history together? So, I don't know, I just kind of like silly names in a kind of way, but really only in the Thursday books, not so much in other books.
This is how dim I am. I manipulated Max's name, Madeline Maxwell, because I intended for her to be known throughout the books as Mad Max.
Ooh,
and I became so involved in the story that I was actually 3 books in when I realised I'd forgotten to do them. Not my finest hour. I don't actually, I choose some names. I chose Dottle because it's a slightly silly sort of name, and nobody called Dottle could ever be really bad. But a lot of the names I'm writing and they just slide out of the pen. There's no conscious thought at all. But names, I think, are quite important to define the character. Yeah. And every now and then I can't get a name, and it's usually because I can't quite see the character. The character comes first and then the name. And interestingly, I had a book where my editor wrote back and said, you've given 2 characters the same name.
Oh, no.
You call them both John, and this is how dim I am, it's pathetic. It's author 101. And I changed the name of the second John to Jim. And I could not get on with that character after that. And even now, I still think of him as John. He's not Jim at all. But character names are very important. They define the character.
Yeah, and I've had exactly that same problem where I've had to change the name.
Yeah,
because it wasn't working.
It doesn't go in, does it?
No, it doesn't work at all. You're wondering who it is, who you're writing.
Yeah, you see what you're up against here, don't you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Nevina. I have a very, very silly question. What's the deal with cheese?
Cheese. It's the deal with cheese. I mean, in general, it's a sort of comestible made out of dairy products. I'm worried you don't know what cheese is.
In your book, it's illegal.
Oh right, in my book. Okay.
Yes.
In my other world.
In your other world, it's illegal, and in your world, it helps with time travel.
Yes.
Yes. So what's the significance of the special properties of cheese?
Okay, there are some things, right, and it works quite well with fruit. You see, some fruit is funny, and some fruit isn't. In the same way that some crustaceans are funny and some crustaceans aren't. Like lobsters are funny, but crabs aren't really. And it's very similar. Cheese has a fundamental comedy running through it. And there's all sorts of jokes, going down the years where people make jokes about cheese, usually about how it smells. But there are some quite interesting comedy sort of things. One that springs to mind is 3 Men in a Boat. You would have read that, I'm sure. And there is this literally laugh out loud sequence in which someone has to take a cheese from Liverpool to London on the train. and it obviously it smells very, very badly, and it's really about the misadventures of taking this cheese. So I think once you latch upon cheese, the comedy sort of comes out of it. It's commonplace, it's amusing, and you can use it, you know, for comedy effects, but it has a kind of bedrock of comedy about it. I don't know. Do you find that cheese is funny, isn't it?
I had a mental image of somebody leaning over a piece of cheese and saying, "Oh, my cheese!" And I actually wrote the Mikey and Adrian story around that mental image. That's how cheese came about. I just thought the most ridiculous thing was to have somebody bending over a soggy piece of cheese on the grass and saying, "Oh, my cheese!" And it grew into, if you're time traveling and your jump goes wrong, and you need to replace calcium, sodium, etc., it's cheese, and I'm very fond of cheese. And it's portable. And then I get these pictures in my head of Matthew, with a little cube of cheese, carefully making a hole in it and threading a ribbon through and giving to Mikey as a Christmas present, you know, portable cheese. I mean, how lovely. It could have been anything, but it just happened to be cheese.
I'm thinking also The Devil Wears Prada. Remember that film? One of the funniest lines in it is Emily Blunt in an early appearance, where they say, "How do you keep so thin?" And she says, "Well, my diet is basically I wait until I'm about to faint with starvation and then eat a cube of cheese." But it wouldn't work with anything else, would it?
No.
Cheese is funny.
Yeah.
I'm Angela. There's been a lot in the press in recent months about books that were published 50 years ago or so, and how some of their language is now less acceptable. How do you feel about your books if in 30 or 50 years' time a phrase that you use becomes unacceptable? Would you be happy for them to be changed and sanitized at that time? Or are they your words and you want them to be your words forever?
Shall I start?
Yes, good question.
I have mixed feelings about this. Firstly, in 30 years I'll be dead. So I probably won't care that much. But I was talking to somebody about this. I would not want to offend or upset anybody deliberately. I mean, very few people would. We make enough mistakes inadvertently without actually setting out to do it. But also, I'm an historian, if I can call myself that, and I have strong objections to history being rewritten to reflect views which are fashionable now, but may not be fashionable in the future. Because once you start, you're on a slippery slope. In 30 years' time, prevailing views today may not be as fashionable then. Do you change them again? Do you rewrite books? Do you rewrite history? Once you start, you can't stop. And once you've lost the original, it's gone for good too. I don't think my books, to me, that they're not as important as history itself. I don't see why you can't have 2 volumes, why you can't keep the original, and it's easy enough to put a plate in the front which says, these books represent the attitudes of the time. You may find them offensive, difficult to cope with, etc., in which case read the revised version. In that case, you'd have the best of both worlds. But I agree, it is a very difficult topic, and probably should be addressed better than we are addressing it at the moment. I think there needs to be a debate about a lot of this, in which anybody can make their views known, because every view is relevant. But yeah, I'm glad to think in 30 years I'm going to be dead. Possibly tomorrow even. Yeah, I do appreciate your question. Do you want to have a go?
I mean, pretty much, yeah, I mean, the same. I mean, you don't want to offend anyone. I don't think, clearly I'm not a big enough author for anyone to have too much, you know, to complain about. I'm already on a sticky wicket because I'm writing as a female, and that has changed. I didn't think anything of that at all when I started that 23, 4, no, lot longer, nearly 30 years ago. That might be seen as slightly different now. I mean, if I was a bigger author, perhaps people have something to say about it. But no, I think, I don't know whether there is room in the industry to have two versions of the same book, but I think it's something that would need to be looked at if it was causing genuine offence and people were finding it difficult to read. But I would also like, again, what you say about writing at the front of the book, saying this was written in, you know, whatever it was, you know, 1985 or whatever I first wrote The Airfare, and at the time, da-da-da. So to give you some contextual historical reference to what was going on so people could understand it. I'm a big fan of Tintin, right? And there is one of the earliest, which is kind of non-canon, which was Tintin in the Congo, which is, you know, some of it, and there are parts of Tintin. He developed as an author, Georges Remy, and he developed clearly a conscience as he was writing, and a lot of his books are actually really, really positive about, you know, some very, very difficult issues. But his early stereotypical renditions of, you know, minority groups was not good. But Tintin in the Congo, they were clearly scratching their heads about it, and they decided the best thing to do was actually to put a wrapper on it, and actually saying, you know, we kind of regard this as non-canon, but this was written in another era, and when Georges Remy had not developed into the powerhouse that he became, and I think that was the right thing to do, rather than withdrawing it or withdrawing or even redrawing the whole book. So.